just make a small correction. Actually, I just left the board of MWS, Methodist Welfare Services. They had the AGM on Saturday, and I finished 10 years with them, right? And so I've stepped off. But I want to thank C.S. David. Thank you very much for this opportunity. COC, thank you very much for inviting me to make this presentation. Gerard, thank you too. Thank you for inviting me to be part of the Charity Council. It's really my honor. And ladies and gentlemen, it's really my privilege to be able to speak to you this morning. Although I'm a member of the Charity Council, I must say right at the start that what I'm going to share with you really represents my own views. Okay, so I'm going to speak from my heart. I don't speak on behalf of COC, neither Charity Council. Well, the focus of our first session is this, all right? It's the Code of Governance for Charities. Hopefully all of you have seen it and read it, all right? But just in case, I thought I'd wave it in front of you so that now you all know what it looks like, all right? This is the revised code, and it comes into effect 1st January, which is only a few months away. Now, obviously, I can't cover the whole code in our session. In fact, my session is supposed to have ended about 10 minutes ago, all right? So I want to only focus on 3 topics, all right? The first is board renewal. Second is disclosure of remuneration and why it's connected to independence, the concept of independence, and conflicts of interest. But what I want to add is that we have a really distinguished panel following me, all right, really distinguished. The collective wisdom of our panel members is immense. I would say unparalleled, all right? I know them well, and I would encourage all of you to take this opportunity to ask them for help with any aspects of the code which you find difficult. Don't be shy to ask them difficult questions, all right? The more difficult the questions, the better. Okay, if these guys can't help you, these panel members, nobody can. But let me begin with some overarching remarks about our code and the governance evaluation checklist that complements it. Let me see if this works, okay? Okay, good. Much has been said about our code of governance and why it's important. You know, many other presentations. But I would like to just add a couple of observations that may not be so obvious. The first is that the role of a charity board is more critical to a charity than a corporate board is to a commercial entity. Just think about that again. I'll say it again. The role of a charity board is more critical to a charity than a corporate board to a commercial entity. And I pick up from what Gerard said earlier. Charity boards play a vital role in the effectiveness of a charity and its sustainability. If you think about it, most listed boards on SGX meet once a quarter. If it's a private company, not listed, the boards may meet even less, twice a year. But most charity boards meet much more often. I have served on on a wide range of corporate boards. And I can tell you that the amount of time I spend on a charity board to discharge my duties properly far exceeds the time I spend on the boards of commercial organizations. Why is this? Why is this? It's sort of counterintuitive, but it could be for a number of reasons. All right, so for example, if you're a professional like myself, you contribute your professional activity, just what like COC said. So for example, if you're a lawyer on the board of a charity, often the charity will look to you for that legal advice. The charity doesn't have its own legal counsel, doesn't outsource it to a legal firm. They will look to you for help. You have got to go in and read the contracts, all right? If you serve on a corporate board, the company always usually has its own corporate lawyer or else has a panel of lawyers to assist. You just attend the meetings and give your opinion. So you see, if you're a member of the board of a charity, you need to be involved. Members of charity boards also have a passion for the charitable cause. You should have a passion, all right, or else you're in the wrong place. Hence, you're likely to be involved with that charity as a volunteer, a participant, For example, if you're an arts charity, right? Or a sports charity or religious charity, you're not just going to be on the executive board or the executive committee. You're going to be involved in the activities of the charity. You're going to spend time. And it's important that you do. And it's important also as board members of a charity that you ensure that your charity is adequately resourced. Adequately resourced means what? All right, enough people, but also enough funds. So that means fundraising. It may mean organizing fundraising activities, events, getting involved. So whatever the reason, clearly the role of the board and board members of a charity is vital to the way in which the charity operates, its effectiveness, and that is why our code is so important. It's a guide to our charity boards. It helps them discharge their roles and responsibilities. So just to emphasize this point, I want to add, if something goes wrong with a charity, it is harder to blame the management of a charity as compared to a commercial corporation. Much greater responsibility and accountability lies with the board. Hence, it's so important that our boards understand their responsibilities and their roles, and that board practices are effective. That's why this code is so important. Secondly, it's important because compared to commercial boards, and I say this in the context of this whole week, David, serving on the board of a charity can often be confusing to board members. It's not so clear what their role is. Why is this? Well, if you look at a commercial board, all right, the roles and conduct of commercial boards are actually quite well documented. Many presentations, many training courses, pretty standard, well understood. But this is not the case with charity boards. Why do I say this? Well, many, like myself, join a charity board, and the assumption we make is that it's like a commercial board. And so we bring our commercial practices in there, our standards, the way things operate. But the fact is, a charity board is different. It's not the same as a commercial board, and this misunderstanding is a cause of many problems, and I'm going to illustrate that later on. Secondly, our charities are very diverse, and as a result, there cannot be a kind of a one-size-fits-all. Each board has to work out for itself what is the most relevant, what is the most effective way to work with management, stakeholders, in order to advance the cause of the charity. Whether you're a sports, religious, welfare, education, health, big, small, medium, new, it's all different. It's hard to say exactly what's the best way a board can contribute to a charity. Our charities grow, they evolve, expectations of society changes, both over time and also because you're bigger, and boards have to adjust to meet these expectations. So actually, it's really tough for charity boards to know how best to discharge their fiduciary duties, what is expected of them. And that's why the code is such a great help. Okay, and that's why this code is such an asset to us. It codifies what is considered best practice, inverted commas. Actually, you'll see later on it's not entirely best practice, all right? But it codifies what is best practice so that board members have a reference with which to guide themselves. It sets out the expectations, actually also of the community and the regulators. You see, the code is not just important for the board, so that's the kind of the second box there. It is also important because it guides the expectations of the public, how people see us. The code helps donors and stakeholders assess a charity. And as Commissioner pointed out, by and large, it helps charities it helps the public gain confidence in the way our charities are governed and managed, that our charities are healthy, all right, that they are well supported. So I should also add that actually the code gives confidence to the government. Think about it, all right? The code actually gives confidence to the government, the regulators, as it encourages the public to support the charity sector with donations and volunteers. And I take my hat off to our government. I think our government does probably more than any other government to support our charity sector. You can even think about the way they give tax exemptions on IPCs. It's not 100%, it's not 200%, right? It was 300%, it's 250%. But for them to push this and encourage the public to support charities, they need to know, the government needs to know, that our charities are well managed and well governed. So you can see how important this code is. And as I look back over the years, I'm convinced that this code has been very instrumental in helping our charity sector grow. Well, this revised code, what I showed you just now, comes into effect 1st January 2018. And there are many improvements. But I can't cover them all. I just want to highlight that, in fact, now we've kind of renamed the tiers, all right? So we now have basic, intermediate, enhanced, and advanced, all right? We dropped out the basic 1, basic 2. It became sort of basic and intermediate. But the key difference, all right, in the way we do the tiering is that now we don't just look at expenditure. We look at both total receipts, the gross annual receipts, and total expenditure, okay? And we look at the preceding 2 years and to see whether you cross the thresholds, whether it's 500,000, 10 million, etc. But the key thing to understand here is gross annual receipts means gross annual receipts, okay? So if you run an event, raise money, it's not the net amount that you raise that goes in, okay? It's the gross amount that you collect. Of course, you minus off the expenses, but when we do the calculation as to whether you cross the threshold, it's the gross amount of receipts, not the net. And when you look at expenditure, it's the total expenditure of the charity, which includes expenditures for the different funds you may have. So it's not just your main operating expenditure, but it's the total expenditure that the charity incurs for its main operations, as well as any other funds that it may have. Okay, so it's quite important. And there are also changes to the GEC, the Governance Evaluation Checklist. The key one here is, and I know most of you were a little upset about this, is that we remove the not applicable option. All right? But it is still comply or explain, all right, which is very important. And why is this GEC important? It's because it's to promote transparency, all right, just as COC said. Transparency is the key, all right, just like the Red Cross, right? We want to encourage board members to regularly review the governance practices against the code. I've sat on many boards, charity boards, and I know if it was not for the GEC, board members wouldn't look at this code. Right? But because they have to tick this GEC, they have to look at it, they have to read it, and understand where their charity stands against the code. And so you can see the importance of this GEC. All right? So please, appreciate the code and the GEC. But now I want to move on to my first topic, which is board renewal. Now, I've selected this topic because I think it is vital, crucial to the sustainability of our charities. It is the one area which, for some reason, charities often neglect. Okay? Look at the principles that are spelled out in the code. You'll see that at the basic tier, there are two principles on this slide. Okay? The first one is succession planning for key office bearers, and this is for all. All right, so here we're thinking about office bearers such as the treasurer, where we say the treasurer's term limit is 4 years. But there's also the other bit, which is ensure steady renewal of the board. Okay, this is for enhanced and advanced. But let me say to the smaller charities, you should also aspire to do this. I mean, this is for bigger charities, but hopefully your charities are going to grow. So we should all pay attention to this. So it's key office bearers and board members in general, okay? And then at the bottom there, that if for any reason board members need to serve for more than 10 years, then to disclose this in your annual report. Okay, disclose this in your annual report. Now, why is it that charities find it so difficult to come to terms with this? You know, when the Charity Council, when the COC put out the exposure draft on the revised code, all right, there were these term limits hard-coded, and the one that we got most pushback on was this, all right? Term limits and succession planning. Why is this a problem? You know, I ask myself. Again, I think there are various reasons, and I think each one of us needs to search our hearts. I think one is legacy. In the past, you know, office bearers, board members, charities held office for life almost. All right? As Gerard pointed out, right? Some feel that, you know, I'm the founder, this is my baby. I have to tell you, I'm just as guilty, okay? I was the treasurer at Singapore Chinese Girls' School for 15 years, all right? My father was a treasurer at YMCA, must be measured in decades, okay? I think 30 years. I know Dr. Robert Lowe, who was president of NCSS at one time, but he was the president of YMCA like for 30 years as well. But the norms and the expectations of society and community have changed, okay? And we can't hold on to the past practices. I had the privilege of being the president of the YMCA, and I'll talk about that a little later, okay? But before me, all presidents had served for at least a decade, okay? But when I came in, I said straight away, max is 4 years, leaving, because we must introduce this. And all credit to the YMCA, they now have a wonderful program of board renewal and succession. So in the past, nominations committee, many charities, no nominations committee. Or if they had a nominations committee, would meet just once a year. You know, and people would come up for re-election. It's at the AGM, but it's like it's the same slate every year. All right? So we find it hard as charities to grapple with this. How can we ask the founders to step down? You know, this is Asian culture thing. Or you're the senior pastor of the church. He's the senior pastor of the church. He must be on this board, right? How can we remove him? And I'll tell you, my own, I also serve on the called the executive committee of my church, the executive committee of my church. And honestly, I've been there for 40 years, all right? Well, nearly 40 years. But there are issues with religious charities. I said I'm stepping down this year because the code comes in January, all right? I'm stepping down. And so the nominations committee agreed I stepped down, all right? But 4 weeks before the AGM, pastor calls me up and says, you know, these other guys whom we've invited have turned us down. We need to fill this slot. Can you come in for one more year? All right, they struggle. There are realities. There are difficulties. Okay? But this part of the code, I think, is very important. And I think it does it well. You see, the revised code still draws a line in the sand. COC has taken, in all credit, you know, to the COC and his office, they've taken account of the feedback which all of you have given, and we have modified this section of the code, but we still draw the line in the sand. All right, for small charities, it recognizes that term limits may be tough, and so it doesn't impose it on small charities. But there's no reason why small charities should not plan for succession, certainly of key office bearers such as treasurer. But for large charities, the code says 10 years. That's the benchmark. But it's right now not a hard line. COC may be thinking about making it a hard line, right? But right now it's not a hard line. And so if there are good reasons to retain a board member for more than 10 years, then disclose it in your annual report. I think this is a very sensible approach. And actually, if you look at the better governed charities, most, in fact, rotate their board members in less than 10 years. So actually, you can't even describe 10 years as being best practice. Very quickly, a couple of examples, all right? The first I've got here is the Association of Muslim Professionals. Relatively young charity, I think not more than 30 years old, all right? But over the years, All right? They recognize somewhere, I think around the 1990s when I spoke to them, that it's important for them to put in board renewal. So this is some of the things that they do now. They didn't get here at one shot. All right? They progressively did it. So they have a board, and the board terms are 2 years. Okay? Every 2 years, when it comes up for re-election, there must be 2 board members that step down. Okay? And it's usually those who have been there the longest. All right? So they have this deliberate policy. 2 years, there must be 2 board members that step down. Each board member, maximum of 6 consecutive years. That's 3 years, 3 terms of 2 years. Okay? How do they do it? They deliberately try and groom younger persons for the board. Okay, so they have this thing called Young AMP, and they develop this youth wing where they identify people. And one thing they have here, which I haven't put down, is they've got a system of co-opting board members. So they can co-opt a person onto the board. He's not an elected board member. He can only serve for 1 year, and after 1 year, he must either be elected at the next AGM or he has to step down. But it gives them a chance to see what this guy is like. He doesn't have voting rights at the board, but he attends as a board member and understands what's going. So it's a system in which they have developed, okay? And they have a very fully functioning nominating committee to support them. So you can devise ways to make it work. YMCA, which I mentioned earlier too, all right? The way it identifies potential board members, it's got a bunch of committees. The ones that you would normally know are like audit committee, okay, a finance committee, a fundraising committee, okay? Each of their projects has a committee, you know, so they have a social enterprise as a committee that oversees that. They've got an outreach project called Project Bridge. There's a committee that oversees that. They get volunteers to serve on these committees, not board members. But you then get to see the person's commitment, the person's background, and the fit. And the nominations committee can then draw from this pool, and it's a ready pool, for new board members to fill in board seats. So capable candidates are then recommended to the nominations committee, okay? And again, the YMCA has this system of co-opting as well, so that if you want to try someone out, you don't elect him properly, you first co-opt the person. If it works out, then you can then put him up for election. So this is something which is very important. But I put this one last bullet, which I thought is also very important, and that when board members reach the end of their term, all right, and it's less than 10 years mostly, okay? It's like 4, 6, or 8. But when they reach the end of their term, some will leave the YMCA completely, but many get channeled back into their subcommittees of the board and the committees of the YMCA. So they continue to be still engaged. All right, so I stepped down from the board of the YMCA, I think now more than 15 years ago. But I continue to serve on their outreach committees. They've created an advisory committee, all right, where a lot of the retired board members serve. So they don't have an executive role, but they continue to stay engaged. So I think charities can look at ways like that so that you don't lose the talent of your board members. And they're there so that actually after 2 years, if need be, some of them can be sort of recycled back. And we've had that too in the YMCA, where some of the directors who have retired, usually after 4 or 5 years, are then invited to rejoin the board. Okay? So there are different ways to do this. So I think board renewal is very important. It is vital to ensure the sustainability of our charities. That's the word, sustainability. All right? And that's the key. So let me now move on. I wanted to discuss remuneration. Why did I pick this topic? Well, I picked this topic because I feel it's often misunderstood. And yet it relates to a very important principle of good governance, and that is independence. So what does the code say? Well, it actually addresses both the remuneration of board members and staff. So this one's about board members. So the key thing there is board members should not receive remuneration. Okay? I think we can all accept that, right? And it's important. It's important. Why? Because we need to remember that a charity is established to fulfill a charitable cause. Its sponsors, its board members should not benefit financially from the activities of a charity, right? So that's why this is important. So board members should not receive remuneration. If they do, and the code does recognize that there are charities where this does happen, you have to make this disclosure in your annual report. It's the exact amount of remuneration and by name, okay? Exact amount of remuneration and by name. By contrast, for staff, and we got to disclose for staff too, all right, the code requires that we disclose the total annual remuneration of the 3 highest paid staff. But you notice the names don't get put down, all right? And it's done in bands. And this is for staff that are above, who earn above $100,000. So you put it in bands and you put it there. So you have an illustration, okay? But the key thing here to note is that if any of these 3 highest paid staff serve on the board, then you need to disclose that in the report as well. So actually the aim is on the board. All right, and why have these disclosure requirements? I think it's because it's important for the board members to maintain their independence. Okay? It's the independence that's important. But just before I leave these slides, I'll just go back one more. I'll just go back. The good news is actually when we talk about board members, we're talking about remuneration for board services. See the first line. All right, remuneration for board services. So actually it doesn't include reimbursement of expenses. Okay, board members do incur expenses on behalf of the charity, you can reimburse. It doesn't include meals if you have lunch or dinner at your meetings, all right? It doesn't include things like that. It strictly refers to board fees, okay? So that's the good news. But let me move on to the importance of independence. You see, in addition to these requirements on disclosure of remuneration, another part of the code, and I think it is linked, all right? Para 1.1.3 says that board members should exercise independent judgment. That's the key. And must act in the best interests of the charity. So that's what it's all about. Independent judgment, best interests of the charity. See, independence for charities, unlike commercial setting where we talk about independence from majority shareholders, principal owners, etc., the focus is independence from staff. Board to be totally independent from staff. Notice that this is an even higher standard than the Code of Corporate Governance. On commercial boards, it's very common to find executive directors on the board. It's accepted practice, okay? But in charities, this is discouraged. It's actually a higher standard than for corporate governance. Nonetheless, the code does recognize that for some charities, there will be staff who will be also board members. Religious charities are the obvious ones, okay, where your pastor is on the board, or he's obviously staff, and yet he has to be on the board. But, and this is where the code comes in, when that happens, we need to maintain a clear distinction between their board role and their operational work. Okay, you need to distinguish between board oversight and operational functions. So actually for charities, as I said before, it's actually important for board members to be involved. I said this at the start. Board members of charities actually cannot be too distant. If you want to maintain effective oversight of management, you actually have to be involved. It's a bit of a contradiction, so I need you to think about that. And yet, as board members, while you get involved, you need to consciously maintain this separation between your operational role and your board role. Think about that as a treasurer. A treasurer often takes on operational functions. Okay, even signing checks quite often, right? Deciding on fixed deposit. You have to take on these roles. You have to get involved. Okay, when I was treasurer of MWS, I have to set the accounting policies. Okay, you often have to get involved, and it's good. But you still need to be able to exercise independent judgment and maintain this distinction between your board role and your operational functions. So that's why it's very important that we understand this concept of independence. And that's why we have this disclosure of remuneration, okay? Because there will be instances when we cross the line. And so we need to be very, very careful about this. So now let me move on to the next topic, which is conflict of interest. Now you might think, why did I choose this particular topic? Well, I think in my opinion, this is probably the most misunderstood area in the code, okay? Funny enough, most people are quite happy to accept the need for a COI policy. Nobody challenges this. Most charities and boards appreciate the need for a conflict of interest policy. But yet, I think most do not properly appreciate its significance. First, let's look at what the code says. Oops, sorry. That's what the code says. The key points here are, if you look at the general principles, all right? Board members and staff should act in the best interests of the charity. Okay? Board members must act in the best interests of the charity. And if you look at this quotation, which is taken from the SSI, I think it is, NCSS have given us this. How we define a conflict of interest situation is where board members or staff with an existing or potential financial interest might impair his independence or objectivity. Okay, so that's the fundamental thing that we're aiming at. Must not impair your independence, must act in the best interests of charity. So this is excellent. It's fundamental to good governance. But as I look at this slide, sorry COC, I have a problem with the word prevent. Okay? I have a problem with the word measures must be taken to declare, I think that's good, and prevent. I have a problem with the word prevent. Why? Because it indicates that conflicts, COIs, are something to be avoided. And I think it's there because we have borrowed this from the Code of Corporate Governance. And yes, in a corporate setting, I fully appreciate the dangers of conflicts of interest and the importance of avoiding them, hence prevent. However, I want to make a case to you that in the case of charities, I think the reverse is true. I am prepared to say, right in front of you guys, that in good, well-managed and well-governed charities, I would expect to find that conflicts of interest are commonplace. Okay, in good, well-managed, well-governed charities, I would expect to find conflicts of interest are commonplace. I'll show you this next slide. Okay, this is taken from the Social Service Institute as well. I got to give them credit. It gives examples of what conflicts of interest might be. Hopefully you can read it, you know. So one on the side is members. Members actually means staff, board members, volunteers, okay? Where you hire a friend or a relative as an employee or engage them as a vendor, or where you buy, second one is buying goods or services, right, from a family business, or where members have a personal relationship with a superior or subordinate, members volunteering or having memberships in other charities, and members receiving goods or services. Most of us would understand that intuitively, right? No problem. And we can see how such situations, these, could impair the independence and objectivity of a board member, could cause him or her not to act in the best interests of the charity. This is a real danger. I have to say it is a real danger. But let me take you through each one of them closely. Look at the first one. Imagine firstly a religious charity, you know, okay, where one of the board members is either the pastor or a church leader. Is it a problem really if his wife or his son works in the office? Actually, you will see that quite often, okay? You might even say it's good. I mean, after all, you know, the father is an elder in the church. But not even religious charities. Say arts group. I don't know. Say one of you is on the board of the Chinese orchestra, symphony orchestra, right? And your son maybe or your daughter, you know, plays an instrument and gets involved in the activities, maybe gets hired by the orchestra. Is that a problem? Actually, it's good, okay? But we need to disclose. Look at the second one. Okay, members buying goods. I can tell you of an actual situation. I know of a board member of a nursing home, okay? She runs a business. It's in the garments business, clothing. Nursing homes need uniforms, all right, for nurses, etc., nursing aides. So she voluntarily provides these uniforms at a deep discount, basically at cost, okay, as part of the board service. It's a conflict, right? But it's actually good, because actually as board members, we should contribute to a charity. We give sometimes in time, we give in money. We also give in terms of our expertise. If I'm an accountant, I lend that expertise. If I'm a lawyer, I lend that. If I'm a business person, I contribute what that business can to the charity. Okay? It is a conflict, but we can look at it positively. Look at the fourth one, members volunteering or having memberships in other charities. I have to tell you, I'm on more than one charity. Okay? Is that a conflict? Are you going to tell me that? I think many of you here, if you sit on boards and you do well at your charities, you will sit on more than one charity boards, okay? I think it's good. I think of St. Andrews, for example, or if you run a community hospital, say for the elderly, you'll find several board members there who also serve on senior activity centers. It's good. There's synergy between the charities. Okay, look at the last one. Members receiving goods or services as beneficiaries. Okay, that's a conflict. I think back, and I'm not 100% sure, right? But the Society for the Physically Disabled is one of our award winners, SPD. And there was a time when all its board members were physically disabled, all right? It was a requirement, actually, if you were a board member, that you were physically disabled. It was a beneficiary, and they are board members. I thought that was very good, actually, when I first heard of it, okay? It's actually good for that society that its board members are the ones who are part of the cause, okay? So there's a flip side to this conflicts of interest. But we need to recognize that it's not always in the best interest of the charity, but can be. There are dangers. And so the message that I have is, actually, we need a very strong conflict of interest policy. Charities need a very strong and effective COI policy. Actually, the stronger your COI policy, the more confidently, the more effectively a charity can manage its COIs. I'm almost prepared to say that, in order to embrace COIs, and I would encourage that because it improves your networking, that you need a very strong conflicts of interest policy. And it's not just that you draw up the policy, but that you implement it robustly. Okay, it's a policy that should enable COIs rather than prevent. I have a problem with that word. So the key, all right, the key defense to COIs is transparency. All right? It's not that it's bad, but that you need to be transparent about any of these relationships that exist. Make full, regular, and timely disclosures. All right? Full, regular, and timely. So most of us operate like that. One annual disclosure. Every year we update, what are our relationships. We tell everybody. But whenever a topic comes up for discussion at a meeting, disclose, okay? And don't wait till next week to disclose. Disclose it straight away, timely, all right? And I think if you make all these known, it's actually very positive for the charity. So, conflicts of interest, in my view, a big issue for charities, and that's why actually the policy is so important. I think if you don't already have one, there are lots of samples you can copy, but I would encourage you not to copy wholesale. We have samples on our charity portal. You can look at it. Look at it and adapt it. Make sure it's relevant for your charity. Don't copy wholesale. Okay? So I think I've pretty much finished. I just want to say in conclusion, the code is designed to help charities to be more effective. Okay? The main aim is sustainability. Now, this code will be reviewed from time to time, probably get tougher, so-called tougher. Actually, not tougher, simpler, okay, and more effective. I'll share with you that we are proud of our charities, but even our best charities still fall short of the best charities on an international stage. Okay? Our charities, the best charities that we have are good, but I think if you put it against international benchmarks, we still fall short. But we are getting there. Thank you very much.